Remember those quiet nights when someone would read you a story just before sleep? Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory, and I'll be your voice tonight as we drift gently toward sleep. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep a little easier, consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot. Tell me in the comments, what time is it for you right now? And do you have any little bedtime rituals? Now, settle in, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, because it's time for tonight's story. The first time I noticed the van, it didn't register as anything unusual. It was just there, parked halfway down the block, a dull white box of rusted panels and faded decals that had been half scraped off years ago. The kind of vehicle you see and forget a dozen times a week. It didn't move, didn't make noise. It just sat there, tucked in tight between a dumpster and a no parking sign like it belonged. It wasn't until the second week that I realized something was off. I was leaving my apartment building one morning, coffee in one hand, bag in the other, when I saw it again. Same van, same spot. Still coated in grime, windows tinted black like a funeral limo. I stopped on the sidewalk and stared at it, frowning. It wasn't that the van was unusual. It was that I was certain it hadn't been there the night before. I would have noticed it, especially parked that far up the curb, practically on the sidewalk. But I shook it off. Figured I was misremembering. I was working long hours at the time, drowning in tech support tickets for a company that barely knew I existed, and most nights I came home too exhausted to care about anything. But the next morning, the van was there again. Then the next. Then the next. Never moved. Never a ticket on the windshield, despite being parked illegally for days. It started to feel less like a vehicle and more like part of the street itself. That's when I started noticing the other details. Small things, but the kind that don't let go once they've burrowed into your head. Like how the passenger side mirror was always perfectly aligned with my front door, no matter where the van was parked, or how I could never quite see the license plate. It was either covered in mud or tucked too far under the bumper to read clearly. Or how, no matter how early I left for work or how late I came home, I never once saw anyone enter or exit the van. Just presence, static, like something behind glass pretending to be still. One night, after a particularly bad day, I gave in to the curiosity. I approached it. I waited until the street was mostly empty, tugged my hoodie low, and walked right up to the side window. I didn't touch it, just leaned close, cupping my hands around my face to block out the glare. Nothing. Pure black. I couldn't see in, couldn't even tell if there was a partition or not. Just darkness. I stepped back and circled around to the back of the van. Still no plate, just a smear of rust where numbers should have been. I reached out, not really thinking, and tried the back door handle. Locked. I went to the front door. Same. Every handle was stiff. The seals around the windows were weathered and flaking like no one had touched them in years. But it didn't make sense. Someone had to be moving it. It didn't make it through street cleaning, didn't collect parking fines, and sometimes it was there in the morning, but gone when I got back. I started taking pictures. Snapped one every morning on my way out. Sometimes it was on the west side of the street, sometimes the east. Once, it was across the street from my bedroom window, close enough that I could have thrown a stone and cracked the windshield. I never saw it arrive, never saw it leave, but it was always there again. A few weeks in, I mentioned it casually to my downstairs neighbor, Drew. He was the kind of guy who always had earbuds in and a vape in his pocket. Not exactly community watch material, but he'd lived in the building longer than I had. I asked if he'd noticed the van. He glanced at it, then shrugged. "Yeah, man, it's been around," he said, exhaling a cloud of something that smelled like blueberries and regret. I figured it was one of those mobile mechanic guys or something. Creepy, though. That was it. No concern, no alarm. Just creepy, though. And for some reason, that stuck with me harder than anything else. Because if something's creepy, why ignore it? Why not do anything? Call it in? Look inside? Unless you're scared of what you might find. A few nights later, I came home late. The street was quiet. No cars, no people. But the van was there closer than usual, parked directly across from my building, just under the flickering streetlight. I stood across from it for a long time, just staring. Then I took out my phone and zoomed in. That's when I saw it. Just barely. Through the tint, a shape, a silhouette, in the driver's seat, motionless. Watching. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the van was gone. Just gone. No skid marks, no oil puddle, no sign it had ever been there at all. I stood on the curb with my coffee going cold in my hand, staring at the empty patch of asphalt like it had just vanished into thin air. For a second, I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe the shape I'd seen the night before was just a trick of the light, or sleep deprivation, or my own paranoia feeding itself in the dark. But when I checked my phone, the picture was still there. Grainy, blurry, but clear enough to see the outline of a head in the driver's seat, shoulders, a sliver of reflection where the eye might be. I tried to show Drew later that night. He looked at it, squinted, then shrugged. Could be anything. Could be nothing. He said it the same way someone talks about a dead bird on the sidewalk. Something unpleasant but not worth dealing with. That was the first time I felt truly alone in this. And after that night, the van didn't just stay away, it started following me. I noticed it outside my job the next Monday, parked across from the entrance to the tech park, half buried behind a hedge, just far enough away that no one else seemed to clock it. I walked past it on my lunch break and felt that same pressure, like eyes on the back of my neck. But when I turned to look, the windshield was just a sheet of black. That evening, it was at the gas station, where I stopped to fill up. A different city, different zip code, same van, same rust, same missing plate, same quiet presence like it had always belonged there. I didn't even finish pumping. I yanked the nozzle out mid-fill and drove home shaking, adrenaline burning through my stomach. I kept trying to convince myself it was a coincidence, that I was just seeing the same model van everywhere, a common enough vehicle, right? There had to be dozens like it, but they all had license plates. They all had drivers. They weren't always watching me. On Thursday, I parked 2 blocks away from my apartment and walked the long way around just to test it, just to see. I left early the next morning, circled back, and there it was, parked less than 30 feet from where I'd left the car. No one inside. Or maybe someone was. It was impossible to tell. That was the day I went to the police. I didn't want to. I sat in my car outside the precinct for almost 20 minutes, convincing myself I wasn't overreacting. But in the end, I walked in and asked to file a suspicious vehicle report. The desk officer barely looked up as he handed me the form. When I mentioned the lack of a plate and that it was moving locations across the city, he glanced up for a split second and said, "You got photos?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. He looked through them slowly, his expression tightening just enough to register. Then he handed the phone back and sighed. "Probably nothing," he said. "We get a lot of weird ones lately. You see someone inside, though you call us. Don't approach. Could be someone living in there. Could be worse." "Worse how?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just looked down at his paperwork and called for the next person in line. That night, I dreamt I was in the van, trapped in the back. No lights, no windows, just the sound of someone breathing behind me, soft and steady, like they'd been waiting for me to notice them. I woke up drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled around me like restraints. The van wasn't outside that day, or the next. For a moment I thought maybe the cops scared it off, or maybe whoever was inside realized I was paying attention and moved on. I almost started to believe it was over. But on Sunday morning, I got a package. No label, no postage. Just a plain tape box sitting dead center on my front steps. My name was written across the top in thick black marker. I opened it on the porch. Inside, wrapped in plastic and smelling faintly of engine oil, was a photograph. Me, sleeping. On my couch, blanket kicked halfway off. Mouth slightly open. The angle was low, close to the floor, like it had been taken through the window. The same window the van had once parked in front of. I didn't go back inside. I didn't want to know what else might already be in there. I drove 3 towns over that same afternoon. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Left my phone at home. I checked into a roadside motel with stained carpet and a front desk clerk who barely looked up from his game show reruns. I took the farthest room at the back, ground floor, corner unit. I pulled the blinds tight, stacked a chair against the door, and left the TV off. But I still didn't sleep. Every sound became a threat. Every headlight sweep across the curtain made my breath hitch. And all night long I couldn't stop thinking about that photo, the way it had been taken from low to the ground. The way I had looked so unaware, so completely exposed. I knew the layout of my apartment. That shot couldn't have been taken from the sidewalk. Someone had to be almost on the glass, crawling. The next morning, I drove to a department store 3 towns away and bought 4 screw-on deadbolts, a window bar, and a cheap home security camera with a memory card. When I got back to the apartment, everything felt off. My keys worked. The lock wasn't damaged. Nothing was out of place, but that didn't matter. I moved through each room like a stranger, checking closets, under the bed, the crawl space in the hallway. Nothing. But when I got to the living room window, the one where the photo had been taken, I saw something that stopped me cold. In the dirt just beneath the window frame, there were drag marks, parallel smears in the earth, maybe 6 inches apart, as if someone had been lying flat on their stomach, propped on their elbows, crawling up to the glass. I installed every lock that afternoon, mounted the camera, secured the window with the bar, and taped the bottom edge with black paper so nothing could see in. I spent the next 2 days locked inside, curtains closed, phone off. lights low. I didn't go to work. I didn't check my email. I just watched the street from the slits between the blinds. But the van didn't come back. Not right away. And that scared me more. Because it meant whoever was doing this wasn't just waiting. They were watching, timing me, learning my routines. Then, on the third night, the motion alert went off. It was almost 3 a.m. The camera beeped once. Then again. I sat up on the couch where I'd been half sleeping and reached for the monitor. The camera's night vision lit the feed in grayscale static. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just the bushes, the sidewalk, the distant haze of the street lamp. And then, movement. A figure, crawling, slowly, deliberately, right up to the window. Just like the photo. They wore black, no shoes, no bag, just long, slow movements, like they were trying not to be heard, not to wake anyone. I leaned in closer to the screen. The figure paused, looked directly into the camera lens, and smiled. A slow, awful smile that didn't belong to someone who was afraid of being caught. This was a message, a signature. I pulled the cord from the wall and backed away, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I spent the rest of the night with a kitchen knife in my lap, every light in the apartment on, staring at the window. But they didn't come back. No knocks, no sounds, no second appearance. Just that one long look into the camera, that slow curl of the mouth, and silence. The next morning, I took the memory card to a nearby police substation. Different precinct. I didn't want to talk to the same cop who blew me off before. This time, I asked to speak to a detective directly. They took me into a back room and plugged in the feed. A younger officer sat across from me while the grainy footage played out. When the figure crawled into frame, he leaned forward. When the face looked into the camera and smiled, he froze, rewound it, played it again. Then he stood up and left the room without a word. 10 minutes later, he came back with someone in plain clothes, a detective, middle-aged, gray at the temples. He sat down, said my name like he already knew it, and leaned on the table with both arms. "Where did you say this was filmed?" I told him. Gave the address. He didn't write it down, just stared at the screen. "You recognize them?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He let the video play again, just that one part. The face, the smile. Then he finally spoke. "We've seen him before," he said. "Years ago." "You have a name?" I asked. He shook his head once. "No ID, no prints. No one's ever caught him. But the footage, the crawl, the smile, it's the same. Same guy, same M.O. What does he do?" I asked. "Takes people. Worse," the detective said quietly. "He replaces them." I stared at the detective, trying to process what I'd just heard. "Replaces them?" I asked, the words dry in my mouth. He didn't answer at first, just leaned back in his chair and rubbed at his jaw like he was already regretting saying too much. Then he pulled a manila folder from the desk drawer, thick with old photographs and printed reports, and slid it across to me. "You ever hear of the Teverell case?" he asked. I shook my head. He opened the folder. There were surveillance shots, like mine, grainy black and whites of a similar van. Same shape, same lack of plate, sometimes closer, sometimes watching from across empty lots. 2015, he said. A guy up in Carthage reported a van like yours. Claimed it was following him. sitting outside his apartment. Same description, same behavior. We did a couple drive-bys, saw nothing. 3 weeks later, he went missing. Just gone. Left food in the microwave. Shower still damp. Door locked from the inside. He tapped the folder again. His neighbor said she saw him after that. Said he was acting strange, quieter, wouldn't make eye contact, moved stiff, almost like he didn't recognize her. A week later, that neighbor went missing too. He pointed to another photo. Same van, her driveway. I felt cold bloom across my chest. You're telling me he's... what? Copying people? The detective finally looked me in the eye. No, not copying. Replacing. We don't know how or why, or even what exactly we're dealing with. But this guy doesn't just stalk people, he studies them, waits, and then something happens. Whoever comes back, they wear the same face, say the right words, but something's off, and no one ever sees the original again. I wanted to leave right then, to walk out and never come back, but something kept me rooted to the chair. And what about the van? I asked. You track it? He shook his head. We tried. More than once. No VIN, no tags, no engine number. The last time we impounded it, it vanished from the lot overnight. The cameras glitched for exactly 11 minutes. When the feed came back gone, no break-in, no tampering, just gone. I left the station with a printed version of the report, a detective's card in my pocket, and the distinct sense that I was now part of something much bigger and much older than I understood. The detective had said they'd keep an eye on my block, that they'd patrol by my building in case the van came back. But the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe that would matter. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a friend's place across town and slept on his couch without explaining why. The next day, I called a locksmith and had my apartment's locks changed again, this time with commercial-grade ones. Double bolts, reinforced plates, metal rods drilled into the frame. I didn't care what it cost. I had the camera reset, aimed wider now, catching the whole sidewalk and street. For a while, nothing happened. No van, no photos, no motion alerts. I started to believe maybe it was over. Maybe the detective had scared him off. Or maybe I'd been a failed target, too alert, too loud. Maybe I didn't fit the profile. But then things started disappearing. First it was my keys. I found them in the freezer. Then my watch gone for 3 days, turned up in the microwave. Then stranger things. My toothbrush damp before I used it. The TV on a channel I never watch. A fork from a set I never bought in the sink. My coffee tasted wrong familiar but not mine. I called the detective again. Left 3 voicemails. No reply. I stopped going to work. I didn't trust myself around people. What if they already saw something I didn't? What if I was starting to change and didn't even know it? The next week, I woke up at 3:41 a.m. sharp. Wide awake, alert, no sound, no alarm. Just that feeling, that crawling primal itch in the spine that tells you you're not alone. I didn't move. I just listened. My apartment was silent. Still, but I could feel it, something in the air, thick and wrong. I finally sat up, heart pounding, and turned my head slowly toward the hallway, and there, just at the edge of the living room, half shrouded in shadow, stood a figure. Same height, same frame, wearing my clothes, my hoodie, my jeans, my shoes, his head tilted at the exact same time I tilted mine, like a mirror, a smile just starting to creep onto his face. I blinked, and he was gone. I didn't move the rest of the night, just sat there, locked inside my own home, surrounded by locks I didn't trust anymore, cameras that only caught what he let them catch, and the growing certainty that this wasn't about fear or intimidation anymore. It was a countdown, and I was running out of time. I didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. I unplugged everything that made noise, the fridge, the HVAC unit, even the wall clock, just to make it easier to hear, to feel. I slept in short bursts, facing the door, with a knife tucked under my pillow and the camera monitor on low brightness at the edge of the couch. The motion alerts stopped coming, not because the van was gone, I was sure of that, but because whoever was inside it no longer needed to crawl. He'd been inside once. He could get in again. I stopped looking at the mirror in the hallway. I caught myself once, just in passing, and froze when I noticed something strange. My own reflection, mouth closed, smiling. It held for just a moment too long, then blinked back to normal, like nothing happened. I told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, the echo of some buried dream, but it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like I'd caught something else inside me, something that wasn't supposed to be seen. On the 4th day, I turned the camera toward the inside of the apartment. A silent admission. The threat wasn't outside anymore. That evening, just past 1 a.m., the monitor lit up again. I blinked awake and stared at the grayscale screen. At first, I thought it was nothing, just static. But then I saw a shape rising slowly behind the couch, just out of the camera's reach. A sliver of movement, then gone. I stood up with the knife in my hand and moved slowly into the hallway. I didn't call out. I didn't make a sound. I just waited and listened. And in the silence, I heard breathing, shallow, patient, like someone practicing how to mimic mine. I spun into the kitchen and flicked on the light. Empty. I backed into the corner, knife raised, heart pounding. The air felt thick, the kind of thick you feel in underground rooms and dreams that don't let you wake. My phone buzzed once. A text. Unknown number. No contact. No preview. Just a single message waiting on the lock screen. I opened it. It was a photo taken from behind me, from inside the apartment. I was standing in the kitchen, knife in hand, staring at the stove. The photo had been taken seconds ago. I turned around, swinging hard, but nothing was there. Nothing except the quiet hum of the light overhead and the growing weight in my chest. I called the detective, straight to voicemail. I dialed again. And again. Nothing. Just that blank mechanical voice reminding me I was alone. I barely slept. In the morning, I drove to the station. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I needed someone, anyone, to listen. But when I got there, the detective was gone. The woman at the front desk said there was no one by that name on the force. Hadn't been for over 5 years. "You sure you've got the right station?" she asked politely. like I hadn't just said the name of the man who sat across from me last week. I showed her the card he gave me. She flipped it over. Blank. Fake, she said, like it was obvious. We see a lot of these. Scam stuff. Private eyes trying to sell services. I left shaking. I drove aimlessly for hours. When I came home, the van was there, parked at the far end of the block. Not hidden, not subtle, just there, like it had always been part of the neighborhood. I stood at my window and stared at it until the streetlight behind it flickered and died. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I wanted to see it. I needed to see the door open, but it didn't. It never had to. That night, I found another package. This time, inside the apartment. No label, no box, just an envelope sitting on the kitchen table. I opened it slowly. Inside were 2 photographs. The first, me again, but in profile. Taken from my bedroom door. I was mid-sentence, mouth open, talking on the phone. The timestamp was 2 nights ago. The second photo, me again, but smiling, head tilted at a strange angle. And the worst part, it wasn't a photo of me. It was a photo from me, taken on my phone, sent to someone else. But I hadn't taken it. I hadn't posed for it. I checked my phone's gallery and found it there, buried between screenshots. I checked the sent history, message gone, number deleted. Just that one picture, sitting there like it had always been mine. Something was eroding, slowly, quietly. I was losing track of what I'd done and what had been done through me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I looked myself in the eye, held it, counted my breaths, watched every twitch, every blink, and for just a second, the reflection missed one. One blink, just one. One step behind, one beat off, and then it smiled. After that night, the world didn't feel right anymore. Everything still looked the same cracked sidewalk, the same apartment walls, the same blinking cursor on my locked laptop screen, but it all felt like a copy. A paper set that someone had reassembled slightly wrong. The timing of things was off. Streetlights blinked too fast. My neighbors didn't blink at all. One morning, I opened my fridge and found it fully stocked with items I hadn't bought. A carton of eggs I don't eat, a brand of juice I've never touched, leftovers in a container I didn't own. There was handwriting on the lid, my name, written like I sign it on receipts. I stared at it for a long time. Then I threw the whole thing in the trash and took it outside. But the next morning, the fridge was full again. And this time, the label just said, "Welcome back." I started recording my self-camera on the nightstand, motion trigger on, set to store everything on an external drive I kept in my sock drawer. The first few nights, nothing happened. Just restless sleep, occasional muttering, the creak of the building shifting in the dark. Then, on the 4th night, I woke up to find the camera facing the wrong way, turned toward the ceiling. I played the footage at 2:14 a.m. The image tilted slowly upward. Not knocked, not bumped, adjusted. A hand entered the frame mine. I watched myself sleepwalk out of bed, stand perfectly still for almost 2 full minutes, then walk to the camera and move it with eerie precision. Then I just stood there, facing the wall, not moving, until 3. 6 a.m. when I returned to bed. In the morning, I found the external drive on the kitchen counter with a post. It stuck to it. It read, "Good work." That was the moment I stopped denying what I already knew. Whatever this thing was, whatever lived in the van, it wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It was wearing me, practicing, testing my skin like a new suit. One day I came home to find my toothbrush wet, my sheets warm, a pair of my shoes missing from the closet. I went to the leasing office and demanded to see the security footage from the building's main entrance. The woman behind the desk looked at me, confused. "You were just here," she said. "You came in about 20 minutes ago. You said your fob was acting up." "That wasn't me," I said, cold crawling up my spine. She turned her monitor so I could see. The video showed me unmistakably, me entering through the lobby, wearing clothes I didn't own, smiling in a way I never smile. He waved at the front desk, said, "Thank you," took the stairs. My hand shook as I pointed at the screen. "That's not me." She laughed a little. "Sure it is," she said, tapping the screen. "Says right here, tenant ID matches. Unit 4B. That's you." I didn't argue. I just walked out. I didn't go back to the apartment. I sat in my car for hours, engine off, watching my own windows from down the block. I saw the lights turn on, then off, then on again. Then the silhouette standing perfectly still behind the curtain, facing out, watching, not moving, just watching. I drove all night, no destination, just trying to outrun something I couldn't see but that already knew every move I'd make. When I finally stopped for gas at a station near the county line, the clerk stared at me too long. I handed him a 20, and he froze. "Weren't you just in here?" he asked. "Same hoodie, same face. You bought gum?" Didn't say a word. I left without taking the change. I checked into another motel, used a fake name, paid in cash, kept the lights off. I wrote a note and taped it to the wall beside the bed. If I disappear, it wasn't me that left. I don't know who I was writing it for. Maybe myself. Maybe the version of me that would wake up tomorrow with someone else's smile. Maybe someone else entirely. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited, knife in hand, camera on, facing the bed at exactly 3:33 a.m., the door to the room clicked open. No knock, no creak, just a click. A figure stepped in, same height, same build, hoodie zipped halfway up. My hoodie, my shoes, my face. We locked eyes for the first time. It smiled. I didn't. It raised a hand, held up a key card, my room key, the one I still had in my pocket. I lunged, but it was already gone, the door swinging shut behind it like it had never been opened at all. I locked the door, wedged the chair, pulled the knife tighter in my grip and stared at the mirror for the rest of the night. And as dawn broke, I swear I saw him again, not behind the glass this time, but in the reflection of my own eyes. By the time I returned to my apartment, I didn't recognize it. Everything was right. The furniture, the paint on the walls, the framed photo near the door, but it felt wrong, like someone had copied my life from memory and missed a few details. The smell was different, cleaner. The lighting was a shade too warm, like it was set for comfort instead of function. There was food in the fridge I didn't buy, a shirt I didn't own hanging neatly from the back of a chair, and on the coffee table was a book I'd never read, opened to the exact middle, like I'd been halfway through it for weeks. And then I saw it. The photo. Me, smiling, arms around my sister. A photo I never took, a moment that never happened. She died when I was 15. I stood frozen, the air thick in my lungs, staring at a life that wasn't mine, but was starting to feel like it could be. I wanted to scream, to tear it all down, but a small part of me, a cold, terrifying part, whispered that maybe this was better. Maybe this life fit in a way mine never had. I grabbed my phone and tried the detective again. No answer. I called every station in the city, asked for him by name, by badge number, by face. No one had ever heard of him. Not even the department where I swore I'd sat across from him, face to face. His number no longer worked. His voicemail had been wiped, and the folder, the manila folder he gave me with the photos, the case reports, was gone. I searched every inch of the motel room I'd left it in. Nothing. The front desk said no one had checked in since me. I was erasing myself, piece by piece, and something else was taking my place. I returned home, barely breathing, and found the front door unlocked, the deadbolt unlatched. Inside, everything was silent. I crept through the rooms, with the knife drawn, every light flicking on with a cautious hand. And then I found it. In the hallway mirror, scribbled in what looked like dry soap or maybe something darker, were the words, "You sleep too deeply." My knees went weak. I backed away from the mirror, turned toward the front door, and froze. My reflection didn't move. It stood there, staring back, arms at its side, head tilted slightly to the left, not mimicking, not matching, watching. I blinked, and it smiled. My legs moved without my permission. I ran. Out the door, down the stairs, into the street. But as I burst out onto the sidewalk, I saw it again, the van, not parked now, rolling, slowly, silently, headlights off, crawling alongside the curb like it was pacing me. The window was cracked just enough. I saw him, saw me in the driver's seat, eyes forward, calm, smiling. The van stopped. The passenger door opened. No one stepped out, just that open space, that invitation. I stood there in the dark, the street empty, the world holding its breath, and I realized I wasn't being hunted anymore. I was being offered something, a trade, an out. Step in, and I could leave behind the fear, the doubt, the unraveling mind. Let him take over. Let him finish the job of being me. All I had to do was stop fighting. I stepped toward the van. One slow step. Another. My heart was silent. No hammering, no breathlessness. Just a numb calm, like slipping under warm water. I reached for the open door, stared into the dim cabin where everything looked too familiar. The seat worn the same way mine was. The smell of my laundry detergent, my keys on the dash. My voice whispered from inside, soft and steady, saying something I couldn't quite make out. I leaned closer, and then I heard it. Thank you. Just that. 2 words, and it was enough. I slammed the door shut, backed away fast, ran. I didn't stop running until I was in the next city, panting behind a gas station, trying to throw up the silence clawing at my throat. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't go anywhere. I just waited in the back of my car with a hammer in one hand and a recording of myself on loop in the other. A reminder of what my own voice used to sound like. Because I knew the final step was coming. Not stalking, not watching, not pretending, replacing. And when it did, when he came again, I needed to be awake. It ended in silence. Not drama, not sirens, just a quiet moment when I realized I wasn't alone anymore, and hadn't been for a long time. It was just past 2 a.m. I was parked behind an abandoned factory off the interstate. Engine off, windows fogged, knife in my lap. I'd set up mirrors all around the car taped to the dashboard, hanging from the rear view, propped in the seat next to me, because I needed to see every angle, every flicker, every shadow that didn't belong. I'd stopped trusting what my eyes saw directly. I only believed reflections now. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because the next thing I remember is waking to the sound of my own voice outside the car. Not shouting, not calling, just talking, casual, like a conversation. I cracked the window and listened. It was saying my name, softly, patiently, the way you might wake a friend. I gripped the knife, looked into the side mirror, and saw myself standing there, hoodie zipped halfway, same faded jeans, same scar on the chin, except the smile was wider, a little too wide, like it was learning what a face was supposed to do. I stayed perfectly still. The figure outside tilted its head, matched my stillness. Then it raised its hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The back seat was empty, but the mirror in the corner showed something else. Another version of me, sitting in the rear passenger seat, hands folded, staring at the back of my head. No reflection on the window, no breath on the glass, just watching, waiting. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I knew that wouldn't help. This wasn't something I could outrun anymore. This was the part where you decide. Not fight or flight, but surrender or remember. I gripped the knife tighter and spoke aloud, not to the thing behind me, but to the one outside. "Why me?" I asked. The figure smiled wider. "Because you stopped looking away," it said. "Because you pay attention." I nodded. "Then pay attention to this." And I stabbed the mirror, just once. The crack exploded through the glass, and for half a second everything flickered. Not just the reflection, the world. The light outside shifted, the air reversed, and the back seat was empty again. I jumped out of the car, knife still warm in my hand, and looked around. Nothing. No van, no me, no sound. But when I turned back to the car, I saw something scratched into the hood, deep and deliberate. 4 words. "You chose too late." I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't go back to my name. I burned everything. Wallet, ID, phone, anything with my face. Because I knew he wasn't chasing me. He was replacing versions of me I hadn't even met yet. Ones I hadn't lived into. Every choice I made was already predicted, already occupied. If I went back to that job, he'd be waiting. If I tried to reconnect with anyone, he'd already made the first move. So I stopped choosing. I disappeared. I sleep in parking lots now. Move from town to town. I don't look in mirrors. Don't answer to my old name. Don't take photos. But sometimes I still see the van, parked just out of reach, watching, patient, like it's waiting for me to come back to myself. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear my own voice again, calling from a dark alley, from the end of a hallway, from the other side of a motel wall. You sleep too deeply, it whispers. And I know one night I will. Just once. Just long enough. And when I wake up, I'll still be here. Still breathing. Still blinking. But the part of me that looks out through my eyes will already be his. Thank you for joining me tonight. Sleep well, friends. And if you see a van parked outside, just promise me one thing: don't wave back. Good night.